Alright, these notes are being taken in the hot lobby, which is not ideal, but everywhere else is taken, so hopefully it won't be too loud. Okay, here we go. These are Paradise Lost notes, and I listened to Paradise Lost on LibriVox, and that helped a lot in keeping it going and keeping the flow and paying attention, but also it's hard to write notes a little bit, and to think about what I should be writing notes on. So these might be not fully formed thoughts because of that, but I shall do my best, of course. And my first idea is relating to justice and freedom. I want to say the core idea is probably going to end up being something like justice is freedom, or justice and freedom are never found apart from each other, is the idea. First thing I want to say is God in Paradise Lost orchestrates events to preserve his justice. I don't know if Milton ever puts it into a situation where it's like, oh, God might not be just in this situation. Oh, but he did the just thing. Cool. Maybe it's just that God always does the just thing. But it seems like God's like, okay, in order to make sure that man has no excuse, I'm going to send Raphael to talk to Adam. He seems to plan things out so that his question is indubitable, or that his justice is not, the integrity of his justice is not damaged or called into question in any sense, not justly. And so, just the idea that justice is with God, God is with justice. It's not merely the things that God does that are just, it is that God acts in a just way, I think would be Milton's position, which I think is also Job's position, a little synthesis there. God holds himself to the standard of justice, and that standard of justice is uncreated, yeah. A lot more could be said about that. Anyway, at that, I will continuing this idea that God holds himself to justice is maybe, I think, why it's hard to read Paradise Lost and be sympathetic with God instead of Satan. I'm not sure what Milton wanted. I think that he was on God's side and not Satan's side. But I think Satan saying, I reject your authority, I reject your standards, and I replace them with my own, I think appeals to particularly American individualism, and kind of just rebellion in general, which people like. But God actually is right, and he actually is sticking to justice correctly, and he's totally right for all of his actions. And so that ought to be the most appealing, but it feels so foreign that sometimes it doesn't. I'm not saying that's how you should read it, but just why I think a lot of people have read it in those kinds of way. That God is the negative character. So there's that idea of justice. God holds himself to justice in an extreme way, I guess, and the story has without it a theme of freedom. What does it mean to be free? Satan wants to be free, so he rebels, or at least he says that, and he's like, I'm not going to repent because then I want to be free. But then Uriel, or Michael, says, because you've rebelled, you aren't free anymore. You've enslaved yourself to yourself. You are your own master. You are your own slave. You can't master yourself without enslaving yourself. That's interesting. And um, so what is going to be freedom? Freedom is when you into your right relationship with God. Freedom is because God is taking himself to this standard of justice. In the end, freedom is justice. To be free and to be just are the same thing. In the end, uh, there are in between times now where you might be, imprisoned even though you're just, but in the end, the just will be free and the free will be just uh, if they remain free. Everyone who is unjust will no longer be free at some point. And yeah, so that's my first core idea. I think I might want to relate that a little bit to the theme of mind as being the dominating factor of the person. In particular, I want to think about Satan says that he's capable of making heaven into hell or hell into heaven in his mind. And Michael says to Adam that the paradise that he will experience after the fall will be far sweeter than the original paradise. And I think that he links it up to the mind somehow, or maybe charity. Yeah, so this idea that the mind can, if the mind's the place where the person is, then the mind can change anything for an experience of a person. But it still won't be free if it's unjust, if it's not true to reality, it's not free, there's no substance to it. I'm just trying to think of what's bad about a heaven made out of hell merely by the mind. It's not real, it's not godly, it's not just. It's not a just representation, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's so much in Paradise Lost, and I'm just barely scratched the surface. That I feel kind of bad for that. Let me see if I can come up with one more smart thing to say. Uh, in the end, truth can only be a comfort. The truth shall set you free, Jesus says in John somewhere. And if you take the truth seriously, it can only possibly lead you to greater comfort or avoiding more suffering. Yeah, if Adam had listened to whatever angel was sent to him to warn him and taken him more seriously, then he wouldn't have suffered. And because he listened, particularly not just truth, but like knowledge of what is to come, because he listens to Michael, who tells him about the incarnation and all that, the two books of futurity, he is comforted and he's able to last his life and not commit suicide. Um, so yeah, truth comforts. Truth and justice and freedom are all the same thing.